On New Year's weekend, my nephew posted Grandpa's old curios for a quick sale. The photos showed accession tags, my handwriting, and a stolen tray number. I didn't shout. I opened the registrar's log, dialed 2 curators, and walked in with provenance. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. It helps more than you think. The first listing hit my phone at 7:12 a.m. A brass astrolabe photographed on a cheap towel captioned, "Vintage nautical piece, estate clear out." I zoomed in and felt my pulse steady the way it used to before board meetings. The accession tag was still tied to the throne loop, AM 1978-041. My handwriting, not an heirloom, a loaned artifact, held in trust. "Uncle Dan, don't overthink it," Nate had said the night before, stacking boxes from my storage locker into his hatchback. "We'll declutter the old stuff. Liquid cash beats dusty shelves." Old stuff. The astrolabe had crossed 3 directors, 2 exhibition rebuilds, and an insurance appraisal that had taken me 4 weeks and 2 magnifying lamps. My hands remember what some men forget. By 8, a buyer asked, "Does it have papers?" Nate replied, "It's from my grandfather's attic." There was never an attic. There was climate control, rolling racks, and a policy binder thick as a county code. I called him. He answered on the second ring. "Morning, Uncle." "You're listing restricted objects," I said. AM 1978-041. That's museum property on long-term deposit. Silence. Then a chuckle. "Come on. They're in your unit, not the museum." "They're in my unit under a written custody agreement because the West Wing is under repair and the board authorized off-site storage," I said. "You signed the intake sheet." "Legalese," he said. "We're family." "Family doesn't erase accession numbers," I replied. I hung up and pulled the steel drawer labeled Deposits, 1970s. The registrar's log slid into view with the soft resistance of well-used linen paper. Pages and pages of entries in my block print, each checked twice by the registrar I trained. Provenance is memory with witnesses. I dialed Claire, current chief curator. "It's Dan," I said. "You'll receive links in 10 minutes. Nate is posting deposit pieces." "On a holiday?" She exhaled, half a sigh, half a laugh without humor. "Send me everything. We'll flag legal." I emailed screenshots. Tags and frame, the tray number W12T3. My note, 30 years old, visible in the corner. Retained cover glass. Original. He'd photographed that too. Thieves these days film their own convictions. At 9:30, I drove to Nate's, registrar's binder on the passenger seat, a copy of the off-site custody agreement on top. In the driveway, his hatchback yawned open, foam wrap tossed like confetti. On the porch table, a woven basket of 19th century letterpress blocks lay like crackers. The ink ghosts still spoke if you listened close. "Nate," I said, stepping into the light, "this stops now." He grinned, reckless. "Uncle, didn't expect you up this early. Coffee?" "You kept the tags on," I said. "That makes my job much simpler." His jaw tightened. "These were in our family." "They were entrusted to me because of my job," I said. "Stewardship isn't ownership. Every line here makes that clear." I tapped the custody agreement. He didn't look. "You always hid things behind paperwork," he muttered. "A whole life of forms?" "No," I said. "A whole life of records so nothing gets lost. Including people." He laughed. "People. These are objects." Behind me, 2 cars pulled up. Claire stepped out of the first, jacket collar up against the cold, and beside her, Mason, the registrar, carried a banker's box. A 3rd car rolled in. Sergeant Hall from the Art Theft Task Force. whom I'd called at 7:30 with the sentence, "This is a friendly preventative." Nate blinked. "You called the police?" "I called protection," I said. "The logs will do the rest." Claire greeted me, then laid out acid-free folders like a card dealer. AM 1978-041, long-term deposit, East Gallery loan. AM 1982-010, letterpress set, donated by Wilcox Printing with reversion clause. W12T3, tray allocation, West Wing. Mason matched objects to entries, reading accession lines aloud in the ritual tone all registrars learn. Maker, date, acquisition path, restrictions, signatures. Nate's bravado wavered. "Uncle, I didn't mean—" "Meaning is recorded here," I said. "So are actions." Sergeant Hall kept it calm. "Mr. Collins," he said to Nate, "no one's been arrested. Items are documented as under institutional custody. Remove the listings now. We'll treat this as misapprehension, not crime, if you cooperate." Nate swallowed. "I'll delete them." "And every message," Claire added, "and you'll send buyers a correction. Museum deposit not for sale." He nodded. "Fine." Inside, I walked to the shelf where the astrolabe had slept under foam. My fingers found the edge of the cover glass without looking. Good work, remembers. "Nate," I said softly, "you inherited my stories, not my authority. You don't have either without the work." He looked smaller then, stripped of the swagger that cheap money loans children who haven't earned it. "I just thought we could use a little cash." "You could have asked for a job," I said. "We always need hands to catalog. Records outlast lack." The astonishment on his face told a different story. No one had taught him how to bring order instead of taking value. That's on me, too. We packed the tray back in order, matching typed lines to numbered slots, the choreography of return. Mason signed, I signed, Claire countersigned, and Sergeant Hall witnessed. 4 names saying the quiet thing out loud. Trust returned. I didn't raise my voice. I showed the line, and the line held. Museums are built on one fragile premise. The record is stronger than appetite. I spent 42 years guarding that premise from moth, flood, neglect, and donors who believed money could buy the past out of context. It doesn't. Saturday morning, I put the premise on the porch table next to Nate's coffee and made him read it, line by line. "Chain of custody," I said, tapping the top of the form. "Say the words." He shifted in his chair. "Chain of custody. What does it mean?" "That each transfer is documented." "And why do we document?" "So we can prove where something's been," he said, reluctant, as if the truth were a chore. "And to whom it belongs," I added. "Read the dates." He read. Accession in 1978. Temporary transfer for exhibit conservation in 1994. Return to vault. Long-term deposit reassigned to my care during West Wing repairs in 2023. Each line initialed in ink that had learned to fade with dignity. "Everything you touched had a witness," I said. "Every move has a counterpart in paper." He stared at his phone. "I took the listings down." "Screenshots exist," I replied. "We save what's real. We also save what pretended to be." Claire arrived with Mason and an empty roll of Tyvek. "We'll repack on site," she said. "Less risk." She opened a flat and spread it across the table. "Let's go one by one." We started with the letterpress blocks. Mason read from the log. Donor, Wilcox Printing, 1982. Condition, fair, with residual ink. Restrictions, credit line required, reversion clause to donor family if collection dispersed. Reversion clause? Nate blinked. "Some donors require that if the museum ever breaks a set, items must be offered back," Claire said. "It protects integrity." "So they could have asked for these back?" They could, I said, if we broke our promise. We didn't. Mason photographed the tray, numbered each block's position, then fitted them into a custom foam insert I cut with a mat knife as steady as a metronome. Good hands are an old man's last argument. The astrolabe came next. Claire lifted it the way a nurse lifts a baby that isn't hers but matters the same. Notched limb, she murmured. Arabic numerals, likely 18th century. The brass is honest. Honest brass, I echoed. It refuses polish and tells the truth with patina. Nate watched as if we were performing a ritual. We were. Sergeant Hall stayed in the doorway, notepad closed. All voluntary, he said, mostly for Nate's benefit. No charges, but the listings count. Nate glanced at me. Are you going to press charges? I'm going to teach you how to fill out a condition report, I said. Consequences should fit the ignorance. He swallowed. Okay. We moved through the rack. A woven basket with a maker's tag tucked under the rim, a sailor's scrimshaw with initials I knew by heart, a child sampler stitched so tightly the thread still sang when you ran a fingernail across it. Each item had a place on a page and a story that didn't belong to us even as we held it. Between objects, Claire leaned close. Dan, did you keep personal copies of the old deposit agreements? In triplicate, I said. Home, office, safety deposit box. Good, she said. We'll digitize after lunch. At noon, I set out sandwiches, not because we needed a break, but because food makes truth easier to digest. Nate took a bite and finally asked, Why did they let you take the pieces home at all? The West Wing leaked, I said. A slow, mean leak that made insurance nervous. The board authorized off-site custody under my supervision because they trusted me. I took what mold loves and placed it where mold doesn't go. He wiped his hands. So I betrayed your trust. You betrayed the boards, I corrected. You also stepped on my name to reach a shelf you didn't understand. He stared at his fingers. I thought museums were for rich people. Museums are for time, I said. We just hold time in public. After lunch, Claire brought out the last tray, W12T3. I could feel the arrangement before I saw it. Left, 3 compass roses. Right, a boxwood rule. Center, the astrolabe's cover glass. Signatures, Mason said, holding out the log. Nate and I both signed. Claire countersigned. Hall witnessed. Nate's voice shook. Are we good? We're not done, I said. You'll send written apologies to the board, to the Wilcox family, and to anyone who messaged you about buying. You'll do 30 hours in the registrar's office, learning why labels matter, and you'll come with me next week to Wilcox Printing. We'll show them their blocks are safe. He nodded. Yes, sir. Don't sir me, I said. Say Dan, then earn Dan. Dan, he said, trying on respect that didn't come from fear. Claire smiled at me over the tray. You still have it, she said. Have what? I asked. The tone that makes people put sharp things down, she said. I laughed. It's the records. They do the heavy lifting. By afternoon, the car was loaded with Tyvek-wrapped bundles and forms that made future questions unnecessary. Claire would drive the pieces back to the museum's temporary vault. Mason would scan. Hall would file a report titled something like Prevented Loss, which no one reads until they need to know why nothing bad happened. I stayed on the porch with Nate. The winter sun slanted across the table, catching the scratches in the wood. He ran a finger along the grain. I'm sorry, he said. I thought I was helping. Money's tight. Money's always tight, I said. Stewardship always costs. I didn't know how to ask. Start by not taking, I said. Then ask. He nodded. Will you teach me? Not about forms, about what matters and why. Forms tell you what matters, I said. But yes, Tuesdays, 9 a.m., bring a pencil. He stuck out his hand. I shook it. His grip held, not too tight, not performative, real. When they drove away, the porch felt lighter. The house held a quieter quiet, the kind that arrives when order returns to its chair. I poured coffee, sat with the registrar's log, and wrote one more line under today's date. Chain unbroken, appetite redirected, boy admitted to the room where records live. There was no triumph in it, only relief. The sort of relief you earn by getting up early and remembering where the tags go. On Tuesday, we drove to the last place a quick prophet ever expects to visit, a print shop that survived the century by refusing to hurry. Wilcox Printing still smelled like oil and old paper, the honest perfumes. The bell over the door rang, and June Wilcox, granddaughter of the founder, looked up from a Heidelberg that could hum you to sleep. Dan, she said, wiping her hands on a rag that had known more ink colors than most sunsets. We heard a whisper, everything all right? It is, I said, because we moved faster than appetite. We're here to show you what almost went missing and what never will. Nate stood beside me, shoulders squared by choice rather than bravado. He carried the Tyvek-wrapped bundle like a sacrament. We laid it on the counter and peeled back the seam. The letterpress blocks looked like alphabet soup in stone, reversed, patient, durable. June leaned in, eyes bright. Good Lord, I thought these were in the vault. They were, I said. They went for a short, unauthorized walk. Now they're home, by proxy. Nate cleared his throat. I'm the walk, he said. I tried to sell what wasn't mine. I'm sorry. June's face softened into something broader than forgiveness, recognition. You brought them back. That's the part the world forgets to brag about. I set the registrar's log on the counter open to the donor's clause. June read, lips moving over her grandfather's stipulation. If the collection is dispersed, items revert to the family. She tapped the line. People think this means we're waiting to call in the debt, she said. What it means is we entrusted the whole to your care. If the whole breaks, the trust changes shape. Until then, we're your loudest cheerleaders. Nate listened the way men listen when shame finally gives way to curiosity. How do you learn all this? He asked. June smiled. By standing near machines that can crush you if you don't respect them, and by reading the paper trail like it's scripture. She showed him the Heidelberg's flywheel, the chase, the timpan sheets worn to transparency. She set a line of type in a composing stick, backwards, logically, and let Nate pull a proof. The impression rose on the page like a fact. Feel that? She asked. That's what records feel like when they land, raised, permanent. We left with coffee and a promise to bring the museum's interns for a field trip. Outside, Nate exhaled. I didn't know people would be kind. People love their history, I said. They're kind to anyone who helps them keep it. Back at the museum's temporary vault, Claire had good news and a problem. Appraisal reaffirmed, she said, handing me a packet. Insurance remains intact, but the board chair wants a statement. Donors will ask. Then we'll write one, I said. Simple, no heroics, just the truth. We drafted in the registrar's office, the room where language behaves. Last weekend, objects on long-term deposit were briefly listed online by a family member unaware of their status. I wrote, Thanks to documentation and community cooperation, all items were secured without loss. We are reviewing off-site procedures to strengthen clarity around custody. Unaware is generous, Mason murmured. Generosity costs less than litigation, I said, and it matches the facts after Tuesday. Claire nodded. We'll send to donors at 5. At 4, Sergeant Hall called. Report filed, he said. No charges. But I'd like your nephew to attend our community talk next month. Safeguarding Cultural Property. He can tell the part of the story that keeps kids off the wrong path. Nate, who just walked in with a stack of acid-free boxes, froze. Me? You, Hall said on speaker, the moment you realized a tag is a promise, not a price. Nate swallowed. Okay. We hung up. He set the boxes down, then faced me square. Uncle, Dan, I'm ready to earn, not borrow. Good, I said. Start by writing your apologies. Then log the Wilcox visit, then help Mason scan the custody agreements. You'll read every line aloud. He grinned. Homework. Work, I corrected. Drop the home. This belongs to everyone. As evening slid along the windows, we set type in the public statement of what had happened and what would happen next. Not vengeance, not spectacle, just order, returning with a chair and a name. Claire read it once more and hit send. In the quiet that followed, I walked through the galleries under construction, the skeletal outlines of exhibits that would explain navigation to children who think maps live in phones, the casework that would cradle objects older than any of us and not much impressed by our drama. The night shift of the HVAC breathed a steady baritone. My phone buzzed. June. Tell your nephew the proof he pulled is drying on our wall. He gets a second pull when he finishes his hours. I smiled and pocketed the phone. In my pocket notebook I wrote, Donor's clause honored. Family corrected by facts. Boy set to learn the presses of responsibility. No cheering section, no audience. Just a man who remembered why he ever loved this work. Not to possess, but to preserve and to teach the next set of hands the difference. A month later, the West Wing reopened one gallery at a time, like a careful book being read aloud. I walked the floor before dawn with the registrar's checklist in my left hand and a pencil tucked behind my ear, a habit I never broke even when the job stopped paying me to keep it. The astrolabe sat in its case with the cover glass properly anchored, its tag reproduced on the label for the public to see, AM 1978 041. We do not hide the numbers, we teach them. Nate met me at the entrance in the blue volunteer vest he'd once called dorky, and now wore like a uniform he'd earned. He clocked in, hair still damp from a shower taken early on purpose. Morning, Dan, he said. No uncle, no sir. The right name in the right room. Let's walk, I said. We started in navigation. He checked silica gel packets with the hygrometer I'd put in his hand week 1. 45%, he said. Stable. Log it, I nodded. He wrote the number the way he'd learned. Clear, unhurried, legible to strangers. In the next gallery, print and proof, June stood at a pop-up press table showing a group of third graders how letters bite paper. Our friend Nate pulled this proof, she told them, pointing to the framed sheet on the wall. He learned that backwards isn't wrong if you know what you're doing. A boy raised his hand. Is that like taking things back when you borrowed them? June smiled. Exactly like that. We moved to the small alcove where Claire had insisted we mount a case about behind the glass how museums keep trust. It held a copy of a custody agreement, a photo of a registrar's log, a tray diagram, and a label I wrote in my kitchen, trimmed to fit by Mason's steady hands. The label read, "A tag is a promise. It tells where an object came from, who is caring for it now, and how it may travel. Museums write things down so the public can know without guessing. You are welcome here not just to look, but to learn how we keep our word." A woman in a denim jacket read it aloud to her daughter. "A tag is a promise," the girl repeated, tasting the words. I felt, not for the first time, how paperwork becomes poetry if you repeat it with care. At 10, Sergeant Hall arrived for the community talk. We set chairs in a circle instead of rows. He opened with a slide that read, "Safeguarding cultural property, community, records, respect. No photos of dramatic raids, no flashing lights, just the quiet machinery that keeps theft bored." Then he handed the floor to Nate. Nate swallowed and began. "I thought tags were price guides. They're not. They're history in shorthand. I tried to trade story for cash, and people here refused to let me. They showed me how to read the room I'd walked into. Now I'm learning to be useful." He didn't cry. He didn't confess for applause. He described a mistake the way a registrar notes a scratch. Plainly, without drama, because the goal is not to punish the wood, it's to protect it from further harm. Questions came, practical and kind. What should I do if I see something with a museum tag at a yard sale? How do I volunteer? How do I teach my kids not to take? We answered in the language of checklists and good intentions reinforced with procedure. After, Claire pulled me aside. The board approved a small stipend for a provenance fellow, someone to help scan archives and match old photos to accession entries. I want Nate to apply. Nate heard. He blinked. "Me? You," she said. "You've already been here every Tuesday." He looked at me. I lifted an eyebrow. My old way of telling interns to say yes to the thing that will make them tired and better. "Yes," he said. "I'll apply." In the afternoon, I sat in the quiet between tours and wrote letters. One to donors, thanking them for trusting our process. One to the Wilcox family, enclosing a photo of third graders setting type with June. One to Serena, the first registrar I ever supervised, now retired in Arizona, who taught me to number left to right, top to bottom, always, and to never let anyone move a tray without a pencil. My last note was to myself, in the pocket notebook that had grown fat with small truths. Provenance is not a list, it is a life. Today, the boy's name entered it. On my way out, I stopped again at the navigation case. A couple in their 70s stood reading the label, fingers laced together like twine. The man leaned in and said, "They don't make brass like that anymore." "They don't make promises like that anymore," the woman said. "Sometimes they do," I said quietly, and moved on. At home, the house settled as if relieved. I brewed evening coffee I shouldn't have and allowed myself the indulgence of one sugar cube, a sin I intend to continue committing. I set the registrar's log on the table not to work, but to know it was there. The pencil behind my ear left a faint mark on my temple, a curator's benediction. I didn't win anything this month. I kept something, and I taught a man to keep it with me. That was the whole reward. If this story found you, if it reminded you that order can be tender and boundaries can be a gift, subscribe, like, and tell us in the comments what promise you keep with your own hands. Quiet work, well documented, holds the world together.